So I want to do one short reading just to start out. And I'll talk about how I ended up writing the book, a little bit about me, how it came to be, and I'll do another reading. I'll talk a little bit more about parts of the book, and then Judy can ask questions. But I'll keep it short and sweet.
And you can ask questions. You can, if you want to ask a question, do the usual, you can wave, and we'll
Great, thank you.
turn to you. Okay.
So, the book is called Swimming to Jerusalem. It takes place over 35 years, begins in 1983 in the south of France. And I'm going to read a short section where our protagonist, Bram Goodman, it's his last day working at a grand hotel on the South of France in Riviera, and he's kind of lost. He's had a rough period before that. He was the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. He saw some terrible things, got a job after a swim instructor in the south of France, and it's his last day. He's sitting around waiting to take the train back to Paris, and he's called over to in the restaurant. A woman, older woman, wants to speak to him. He's only 18 years old, so he sits down. He has a nice conversation with this woman there. Her name is Ruth, and he doesn't know much about her. This first opening is he meets this older woman. She's very elegant, sitting on the terrace of the hotel, and she's elegant. He notices when he meets her, she has blue numbers on her arm, which he knows what that means. And they do small talk. And as they continue to talk, Ruth, her name is, asks a question. Will you be going back to Israel? Ram raked his fingers through his hair. No, I'm not sure when I'll go back. He reached over for a croissant. As he did, he noticed her looking at the small Hebrew letters tattooed on his arm. What does your tattoo mean? She asked. The tattoo on his arm was relatively new. Ram had it done 4 months ago on the morning he left Israel for France. The few times he was asked about it, he said it meant inspiration, which it did to him, and left it at that. Yonatan, he was my cousin. He was a great swimmer. He placed his hands back down the table and said, well, is more people coming?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Another one.
Oh, great, wonderful.
Come on. Ellen, grab some water if you want and come join us at the table. Ellen is from the school.
Okay, I am on.
Is this tape taken?
No, it's all yours.
Thanks.
So, well, I'll wait a bit to get the water, then we'll start it again, okay? So, Yonatan, he was my cousin. He was a great swimmer. He placed his hands back down the table and said, he wanted us to swim the English Channel, the two-way, back and forth. We'd be the first Israeli cousins to do so. We joked that because we have French passports, we'd be allowed to stay and have lunch at Cape Grenade before returning. The rule is you have to stay, you can't stay more than 15 minutes later than the passport. We have one. You know these French on their rules. We'd swim back to England the same day, Ruth said, 2 crossings? Well, probably not. After a heavy French lunch, those rich cream sauces, probably not a good idea. Graham said, forced himself to be funny. Watching you swim, I can tell you're very strong. I'm sure you could do it. Graham's throat tightened. He only believed we could. He was afraid to look at Ruth as he felt his eyes welling up. She reached over and placed her hand over his tattoo. Graham looked at her. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. You asked me over to thank me, and I bring up, it's all right. You are who you are, and as you should be. It's okay, she said, while rubbing her fingers softly across his arm. Her maternal caress felt so loving. It was a sensation he hadn't experienced in a long time. Collateral damage, she whispered. She was married to an army man. She knew what that meant. Ruth carefully pulled her hand away, sat back in her chair, and then spoke. You know, today is September 1st. No matter where I am, the first day of September, I'm back in Warsaw, my father's bakery. It was a beautiful day, sunny, warm, like today, but instead of the smell of the sea, it was the smell of fresh bread. And then, 44 years ago today, the world shifted. I sometimes think about how the world shifts every day for someone, for good, for bad, reasons we can never understand. And here I am this lovely day with you. May I ask you something? Graham nodded. You were practicing Jew, right? No, not me, he said quickly and perhaps too defensively. Oh, I only ask because I see you wear a Magen David and a Kabbalah string on your wrist. Graham raised his hand and immediately placed his fingers on a small star hanging in a chain from his neck. He'd already forgotten he was wearing it. I'm not religious at all. I never go to shul. I never even had a bar mitzvah, and I like pork. If you ever stuck at Kennedy Airport, there's a place called Kirby's International in Queens. Best roast pork sandwiches in the city. I'll try and remember that. Graham immediately felt stupid. People dying on the terrace of the Hotel du Cap Eden Rock Riviera would never be caught dead at Kirby's International in Queens. I'm basically a heretic. This is the place his thumb and forefinger back in the Magen David, my cousins. My uncle sent it to me. I only received it yesterday. This is my first time wearing it. He picked up his wrist with a worn red string. My mother's from Morocco, and they're into mysticism. These are supposed to ward off the evil eye, but I guess this one was defective. I'm not observant or mystical, said Ruth. Graham thought it was best not to share that devotion to his faith is limited to kicking the crap out of any dumbass kid in junior high school who uttered anything close to anti-Semitic remark. They both looked out at the sea in silence. That's what Ruth said. The Côte d'Azur could be glorious. My husband took me here first in 1947 when we got married. After seeing so much ugliness in the world, it's hard to imagine that such beauty could still exist. Looking at the sea, Graham said, that's so true. Then he turned and looked at her and said, may I ask you something? Please. Graham tried to choose his words carefully, but instead they spilled out of his mouth. How do you go on? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. He abruptly stopped speaking. If he didn't, he knew his voice would crack, the tears would flow. He looked at her. Her blue eyes seemed more intense now than earlier when he sat down. She placed her elbows on the table, leaned in, clasped her hands around his before she spoke. I decided many years ago that I must go on, in memory of all those who are no longer here. And the only way to do that was to eliminate my heart for others, but especially for myself, and to remove the hate and the guilt. It is hard, but we are capable of that. You are capable of that. You are so young. You too will go on. You will do good things, a wife, children, dear friends, all of them will love you. You will love, and they will love you back. You're a kind and good person, I can tell. You must not let the hate get in, ever. Someday, maybe, he thought. And that's the end of the preface. And it sets the tone for the story of this young man who was born in Paris in 1962, of a Polish father and Moroccan mother, moved to Israel as a toddler, 5 years old, where his cousin lived, his aunt and uncle, and he had an idyllic childhood in Israel. Until he was 12 years old, his family moved to Brooklyn, to New York, Brighton Beach. And
I'm
he,
sorry, Seth.
Yeah.
I didn't comment at the beginning.
Okay.
I don't know if this is based on a true story.
it's fiction. It's a fiction story. Fiction.
Okay.
Fiction. It's not, I'm not Graham. I'm not the character.
Is it semi-autobiographical?
There are autobiographical elements in the story, but generally it's all from fiction. I pulled it out of air. But there's some things in the story that are very real. That
Can you
people
tell
don't
us
know.
what?
As I talk about it, I will.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely will. I'll be happy to share that. So he comes to New York, Brooklyn, 12-year-old. He goes to junior high school in Brooklyn. He's a really obnoxious kid, the kind of guy you'd hate to be around. Arrogant, full of himself, thinks he's a ladies' man, smart in school, but a real pain in the neck. And he swims. He's a good swimmer on some team in high school. Gets a sweet scholarship at Dartmouth College of New Hampshire. Flunks out after the first semester. He flunks out because he's having too good a time and not sure what to do. His parents don't give him much direction. He goes back to Israel because his cousin Seth, who he grew up with, his best friend and cousin Yoni, and they join the IDF like most young men and women in Israel when they're 18. And their first couple of years of service is pretty boring because he speaks English and French. He's recruited to do tourist posters through the IDF uniform as a soldier in Israel. The last 2 months of his service, he's sent north to Lebanon with his cousin. This is 1981, when the Lebanon War is taking place, and he and his cousins see terrible things, experience terrible, terrible things, and his cousin does not survive. He's lost and he decides he's leave Israel. He goes to Paris, where he's had grows a small child, and starts playing the guitar in the streets of Left Bank. And he's not a good musician. He's loud, but not very good. And he meets Liz, an American who is traveling through Paris with her fiance, who she realizes is a jerk. And he meets him. They have a nice meeting. I'll read about that a little later. And that's where the story begins. It goes over 35 years of his relationship with his wife, with Liz, who's not married. She is married for a long time. His 3 children. He's 2 girls and a young son, Theo. And when Theo is 11 or 12 years old, he keeps asking his dad, I want to have a bar mitzvah. And Bram never had one. Bram had no religion growing up, even though he was living in Israel. In New York with Liz. Liz is from Arizona, Unitarian. They didn't practice anything particular. But his son wants to have his bar mitzvah. And Bram has to deal with that because he wants to ignore everything about his past. And he realizes as a father he can't do that. And that's the story. Means it goes on over a lot of many years. We go back and forth in time. So that's the general story. But I wanted to go a little bit about me, just to connect.
Right.
I'm a New Yorker. I was telling Bernie, he was born in the Bronx. I was born in Brooklyn. So I lived in Montauk for many years with my mom. My parents split up.
You're in Brooklyn.
East Flatbush.
Me too.
We did. Troy Avenue.
East
Waxman.
94th Street.
East, that's fancy. But so I grew up there. Mixture of Brooklyn, Long Island, Miami Beach. My parents' marriage got a little weird. They sent me to my grandparents in Miami Beach in the 60s. That was a lot of fun because nobody watched, we used to hang out. I went to art school in New York City, Parsons School of Design in the 70s. When we all in the city, it was a different place and it was supposed to be scary, but I loved it, it was what I was doing. And so we were all having a good time. And my connection to Israel is limited. I had family there. My father's family, most of them came before the war, luckily. Some didn't. Those who did not come or were killed in Europe. But it turned out in the 1970s, we found cousin Regina, who survived the war because she had blonde hair with blue eyes and was with the partisans in the woods. And in 1978, it was before the internet, so discovering relatives is so different. They discovered that Regina was in Tel Aviv. I was going to Europe. My dad wrote her a letter saying my son will be there. I get to Tel Aviv late at night, knock on the door. She has no clue who I am, never got the letter. Can't speak English. My Hebrew is terrible. But in a mixture of Yiddish, French, English, and Hebrew, she figures out I am her cousin's son. And she treated me like the son of God. It was incredible. She made me stay in her home as my base in Israel for 2 months. I traveled around, but always came back to Regina's, where I had this incredible dinner, took a shower. It was great. And but she was only a relative. She passed away about 10 years later. But after that, I know the relatives. But I met many good friends, and I've been to Israel many times. The last time was 2023.
Let me interrupt 1 second. Josh, do we have to okay the recording? Go on.
No.
Legally, yes. If people's faces are in it, you have to get their permission.
Okay, fine. Go ahead.
So I was in Israel a number of times. Last time was 2023. I was supposed to be there last month. I had to cancel that for many reasons. It's a very special place for me. It's what's happening now is very difficult for me and everybody else, I'm sure. But it is a special place for me. The book came about. I like to write. I've always written. I was a terrible math student, science student, but I was a good writer, good history person. So I always wrote stories. And in my senior year of high school, Mrs. Rosen taught creative writing. And I wanted to be in her class really badly, but I couldn't because I was a B-level student. She took A-level students. I went to a plea and she said, okay, take the class, but you got to work hard on this. So I loved the class. I loved Mrs. Rosen. She was cool. With the moment in the late mid-70s, 73, 74. And our final project was to write a short story. I worked really hard on the short story. And when she handed She put it down on the paper where I couldn't see the grade. She was, I want to speak to your class. I got really nervous. Like, what did I do? I used a curse word in the story. It was important, I thought. Oh, she should fail me for this. Class empties out. I sit down at the desk. She looks, since 1970, takes that cigarette, lights it, and says, I love your story. It was
Wow.
beautiful. I turned it over, A plus, beautiful. And we spoke about writing. My first writer-to-writer conversation. I think she may have written for New Yorker a couple of short stories. She was a writer. And no one else in my life was a writer like she was. So it was so exciting. And she said something to me which I never forgot. A good character in a story will tell you what they want to do. If you really develop your characters, they will tell you what the story's going to be. I always thought of that. And when I started writing this during the COVID. I had a lot of time during, we all had a lot of time during COVID. I watched a lot of Netflix. I got bored. I tried to bake bread. I'm a terrible bread baker. And I live here. We're very fortunate. It's a nice area. A lot of places to take out food. But I started writing, and I didn't know where I was going. The story of a young man and his wife, and his kids. I had no clue where I was going, how I was going to end. My wife would say, "What are you working on?" I go, "I don't know where it's. I don't know what it's called. I didn't have a title for it." And this was about almost a year. 2020. I guess it started COVID. I went to end of 21, early 22.
Excuse me, do you mean to say that you started writing novels during COVID?
Yes, I wrote during COVID.
Amazing.
I
You
did.
are really amazing
I
to
read-
do that.
I've written short stories and plays before, but never I didn't know this would be a novel. I guess I was writing something,
Yeah,
and it was exciting because
you love writing that.
I love that the characters became my friends.
Wow.
It's kind of scary. There's a great writer, Natalia Ginsburg, and she's a wonderful writer, Italian. And one of the stories, the back of the story, and the afterword of the story, she says, none of these characters are real. They never lived anywhere. They never existed. But to me, they are very real. They're my friends. I hope they be your friends too. And I thought of that when I wrote my book. And since I wrote it, people have said they love the characters and they're very relatable and they're real. And I take that as such a compliment. So that's how it came to be. Mrs. Rosen telling me to go with it. And I've been doing that. I write about places I know. New York City is the novel. Queens, where I worked for many years. Paris, where I lived for a little bit. And I was there last month. It's still my favorite place in the world. Israel, which I've been to a number of times, and people I've met. And the mind is like a file cabinet. We meet things, we hear things, we plug it away, never know where we're going to use it. And people say, "Is this story real?" It's not. It's a fiction story. There are autobiographical elements, but things have happened. I met people that stayed with me for reasons. They come and go. And when I was writing this story, I remember when I was in Paris as a young man, 19, in the early 80s, no, this was 83. I'm on one of those, boats that go down the river, the bateau, which was tourist boats. And I meet these two guys. One of them is Israeli, one is British, but he grew up in Israel. So he was made Aliyah with Israel. They both had just finished up their army service. And the British guy spoke beautiful English, obviously, understood every word he said. His friend's English was not very good. His friend was kind of a jerk, I thought. His name was either Avi, or Ami. I'm not really sure. But he was like a pompous ass. And, young guys, we go out to a cafe, start drinking. And it was obvious to me, Ari and Simon, the British guy, had experienced some terrible things. And Simon was very detached talking about it. Avi, the more he drank, the more intense he got and upset about what he saw. And I don't remember the details. And this is not his story, but he clearly had post-traumatic stress syndrome. I didn't realize it then. I was too young to understand this, but looking back, he was up in Lebanon doing the camps, Shatia and Sabra, which were terrible slaughter. And so I got that idea. Other autobiographical, other pieces. I do have a brother who was severely mentally retarded. The book is dedicated to my brother Mark, who died during COVID. He was a couple years old, but he was born terribly disabled, and I was his guardian my whole life, as soon as being an adult. So that's real. Um, People ask about Liz. This is about me.
Right.
Judy asked me to ask about my wife, what she thought of the book. And when she's the first person I showed it to, and she liked it. She liked some of it she liked, some of it she liked. Everybody asked me, is Liz based on Diane? I said, of course, in some level she is. And at first, my wife was a little surprised at that. But then, as she met with other people who read the book, they'll say, Liz is such a great character. She's the grounding character in that family. Some people love Graham, others think he's a total jackass. I mean, I have I have two women who very fast swim group, and two women read the book who don't know me that well. This is the pool they see me, they don't know me. But one of the women said, I love that guy Bram. I want to meet that guy Bram and go on a date with him. The other one said, he's a knuckleheaded potty mouth. And he's both. He's this like incredible guy, but he's a knuckleheaded potty mouth sometimes. So Diane said she didn't like Bram. She thought he was a knuckleheaded potty mouth. But I think she feels good that people see her in this character of Liz. I didn't plan it that way, but she's the grounding force for a very stable family. Her family, like Liz's family, the book is very stable. My family was quite unstable, so maybe that's the parents of Brad. My father was not exactly like his father, but my mother could have been a little bit like his mom, very studi and detached and loving but difficult. So that's where
Well, and obviously what was true is that you were brought up Jewish, whatever that means, or however one defines being Jewish, and your wife is not, like the character in the book, so,
that's true.
yeah,
That's true.
that experience. Did you have something,
Okay,
Ella? No, okay.
Yeah, so I read the stories about relationships, parents, child, father, sons, Bram with his father, and with his son, I love the character of Theo. When the book starts, Theo's this 11-year-old little kid, kind of not bratty, but this 11-year-old kid. And by the end of the story, he's really matured, and he realizes what his father has endured, and there's a closeness there that is. I love that. I only saw this after I wrote the story. I didn't plan it out that way. I really believe that. My writing process. I have what I call idea nuggets. I'll jot a sentence down. I'm working on book 2, second book, and I have 4 pages, single space of nuggets. Like today I had one, the character wearing a Brooklyn College sweatshirt drinking Starbucks in France. I'm not sure where that's going, but it's going to be used somewhere. There's nuggets, and I put them in somewhere. I lay in bed at night and look at this when I can't sleep. Who sleeps anymore, especially this weeks? I think about things, and I don't want to think about current events. I think about the book that I want to write, and think about, what would be like daydream for.
No, I want to go out and cough out there.
Oh, okay.
He gets that periodically.
Okay, no problem.
Excuse me, Seth, are you self-published or did you want to
I
publish?
did self-publish, but I have an agent now.
Oh,
Yeah.
based on the success of what you wrote?
Yes, I'll tell you the story. It's really interesting because that's once how I'll get to that. But, getting ideas. People I'll see someone in the subway and that look of somebody, the young kid, the guy, once was in the subway, so it's like, guy, you look at him and think he's probably illiterate. He pulls out a copy of Dostoevsky in Russian. So
Show off.
parents is over anything. He was raggedy and I was a mess. And I have a number of friends who are writers, they're all nonfiction writers. I don't know anybody who writes fiction. I know people, but not personally. My friend Phil was a great nonfiction writer in history. He really helped me in many ways about the writing process. Because the thing about writing is like making a pudding. You get it ready, and you put it in the refrigerator, let it gel. Like writing, you work on it for a couple of days, put it away, and go back to it. And maybe it gels, maybe it doesn't. And he's right. There are some days I'd write all day, not look at it for a couple of days, come back and this is terrible. How could I have worked on this? And there are other days I think, wow, this is pretty good. So the writing process is really interesting, and I obsess sometimes over the exact word. And I have something called novelist remorse, which I read about other novelists. They finish a book and they look at it, it's published. How could I have written this? This is the wrong word. I should have put this. And my publisher and editor said, stop doing that. Just stop that. You finished it. Don't do that. Never help me. And I think about the day it was published was very scary because I was telling Bernie earlier, you never know what someone thinks you're writing. It's like having a baby. It's also born. It's not yours anymore. Everybody can criticize it. And I was very fortunate. I had an excellent Kirkus review. Kirkus is the main reviewer, which you send in the book, but they don't guarantee good review. So if you get
KARKUS.
yes, you've seen them in New York book.
Yes.
Kirkus review. The get a good review in Kirkus is something. So I sent it out. I got the notice about 2 months later. Your review is ready. Press the button.
Does that cost money?
It does. If you're a major writer, you publish a page for it. But I
Yeah.
was self-published. I'll talk about that for a second.
Okay.
Because when I started working on it and realized I'm getting more than like a couple of words here, I have like 10 chapters, I got to publish this. I wrote to agents, and no one got back to me. A lot of people wanted to help me for a price. That always flaky. I didn't do it. But I realized ageism is real. Nobody wanted an older guy from New York writing this. It was, so I decided I'm going to self-publish. And there are a lot of people out there who will take your money and, publish.
I'm working with some authors,
Yeah.
Self-published.
Yeah. And I found a company out of Oregon, Luminary Press. It's a woman-owned company, small. And when I called them, and the woman, the publisher, Pat, was on the phone with me for an hour, not trying to sell me anything. And she said, the reality said, we're more literary than we are mercantile. I do make money on this, but I'm not getting rich. And she won't take certain stories. But I worked with her. She signed me managing agent, managing editor, and the editor. I said I need somebody to really edit it properly, not content. I knew what I wanted, but proper grammar and all that. And I said I want an editor who also will read it. It doesn't sound right. Let me know. And I said I don't want an editor like me. I don't want a Jewish guy from New York. I want someone so different than me. I'm sure they got somebody.
Why didn't you want the Jewish guy from
I
there?
wanted to see if if it resonated with other worlds, not my world. And see, I got Denise. This is all online during COVID. So I never met Denise. She sent me a sample of editing. It looked good. So I said, let's go with her. And because we have Google today, I checked out, Google Denise, had her last name. What I could tell, she lives in the woods in Washington State. She loved nature. She's probably in a lesbian relationship, not Jewish. I said, perfect. Someone so different than my life, not a New Yorker, female, always different than me, not Jewish. And she had the book for 3 months. And she sent it back, a lot of edits, but notes saying, the first thing, I love this book. I learned so much. And it made me feel it's universal. It's not just the story of a Jewish guy in New York City. And since I published it, I've sold about 2,000 copies.
Wow.
Pretty good for self-publishing.
Boy,
I'm sorry, how many?
2,000.
Wow.
I must tell you that the people I work with who self-publish, maybe they've sold 1,000 books.
And I also try to market myself. I work with people to do e-blasts, and I'm involved in a different couple of the Jewish Book Council. I've been on
Yes.
book tours,
Yeah.
which has just started recently this fall. But the reaction I'm getting is blown me away. And I try to find a through line of who the main people are like, older, younger, women, male, female, Jewish, non-Jewish. The best reviews I'm getting are older, non-Jewish women.
Huh.
Go figure. I don't know, but the review, and also I was very concerned how it would play in Israeli readers, and it's so far so good. I've got some very good reviews from people in Israel, who were Sabras and some many years ago. I had one interesting, very great email about 6 months ago from Irene Rabinowitz in Jerusalem, very upset at me.
I think
Yeah, Irene writes to me and says, you spelled Technicon wrong, and the worst thing you did was you said it's the Yiska prayer when it should be the Kaddish prayer. I screwed that up. You know, if Denise was Jewish, she may have picked up on that, but she wasn't. I should have known that, but I get screwed up. Like only in 1 or 2 places. But the great thing about self-publishing is you print on demand. So I made the change right away, and Irene and I became pen pals. And now, if I ever go to Israel, I will hang out with Irene. Lovely. So it's been a great journey for me, and I'm looking forward to working on another piece, and that's really exciting.
What is the next piece going to be?
You know, I may use a couple of characters from this book. After October 7th, I mean, that was a terrible day. And I was doing a book. I had a book event in the Bronx that day at the reunion of Camp Kinderland, which is this wonderful camp my kids went to, my cousin was director of. And in the story, I told about Camp Utopia, which is based on Kinderland. And they had the 100th anniversary party, so I was asked to talk about my book there. And that was October 7th. And everything fell, everybody was very confused. But that night, I get home, 2 days later, I get home, and my friend Larry Turkheimer, who I grew up with, he read the book and loved it. He lives out in Beverly Hills. And he wrote to me, Seth, it's been the worst day of my life. He coaches the American Israeli lacrosse team, and 2 of his guys were at the festival. Never saw him again. He was very upset. He emailed me, he said, I keep thinking about your character. What would he say about what happened today? So that gave me the idea to write a story using some of the characters. It mentioned October 7th, 2023. I'm not sure where it's going. Just like this book, I don't know, but I am working on something.
Oh, that's great.
Hopefully I don't need another COVID experience then.
I hope not. Okay.
If you like to ask questions,
Yeah. Well, I'm intrigued about your relationship and the character's relationship with somebody who's not Jewish, and how that works. What are the things you've got to deal with, get over with, how family reacts, or what you learn from one another. Yeah.
My relationship is not the same as Bram and Liz's, but there are certain similarities. My wife, I met in Europe, just like Bram meets his wife in Europe. Different ways they met them. And she's from a very progressive family in Omaha, Nebraska. Catholic, but of the liberal Catholic, not the dogmatic, no abortion, and very more like Dorothy Day, really Catholic woman, and open to people, And Liz's family is like that too. In the story, Liz's mother, Joan, is this very strong woman. In the story, Joan is from a wealthy family, and Liz's father, working class, farmer, worked as a caddy in the golf club, met his mother, and Diane's family is different like that. But Graham clearly did not, when they had children in the story, he certainly is not interested in religion, raising them in saying you must go to Hebrew school, or he doesn't even want his son to have circumcision. I don't want that. It's barbaric. And Theo doesn't have one, which Graham's mother's very upset about, which always reminds him that it's a terrible thing. But Graham never denies his Jewishness. One reader said, I don't like the way Graham despises being Jewish. Absolutely not. Graham is proud of being Jewish. He shows it in his anger. He's the kind of guy, you make a joke about a Jewish joke, you're not Jewish, he'll kill you. He can make the joke, but no one else can make the joke.
Right.
So that's his way.
People like that.
Yeah, we all know people like that. It's okay for me to make a Jewish joke, but heaven forbid Mrs. McCarthy makes a joke like
That's
that.
right.
See, that's his way of dealing with it. He never denies his background. just denies his experience in the army, military, and he hates bullies because he was very protective of his brother, his older brother who was severely disabled. And at a very young age, like 4 or 5 years old, he did protect his brother. And that's what about baffled him to some extent. I was 2 years younger than my brother, and very rarely does someone pick on my brother, but if they did, and I had a disability too, but in my brother, I would give him hell.
And talking more about the interreligious marriages have certainly more frequent now. I think we have them in our family.
I did too.
Yeah, right. And how does that make things difficult, or how does it? And how do you deal with those difficulties
I think
or challenges? Maybe I should call.
if you decide to make them challenges, personally, we decided not to make them a challenge. This is who we are. If someone else has a problem with it, it's their problem, not my problem. My wife, so we moved from New York when our baby, when we twin girls. They were born that year, we moved to Nebraska because we needed help. I was living in a one farm with Diane with twin. A little farm, good for one person, not so good for two. We had four. We moved to Nebraska, and my wife decided we're going to raise these kids Jewish. She really, even though she never converted, she was really taken by liberal Jewish thought, not orthodoxy, but more progressive Jewish thought. And it's her decision to raise them Jewish. And as in New York, you can do anything, no one cares. In Omaha, small town, it is a small town. It's acceptable to say, so what church do you go to? It's like that's conversation. Right. And you don't go to church. So we raised them Jewish. We started in Omaha, they were only 9 months old, moved there. And they were raised Jewish. And they were prophets for the Temple of Emmanuel on Fifth Avenue. We were very, was active members, but I loved the programs there. And there was a period a number of years ago where it's a series of multiple tragedies, and the rabbis were so great to me and so helpful. So we go there regularly.
What was it like being in Nebraska?
I
I've lived in New York, I've lived in LA, but
it was a great adventure in my life, Nebraska. Because I never crossed the Hudson River until I went to Nebraska. Really, I've been to California, but never in that middle area. But it was cheap. I could buy a house on credit card. I'm not kidding. I really did buy a house. I took a cash advance to my house was gorgeous. I've never had such a nice house ever. The people were really nice. It was different. I was an outsider. I realized that. I never had anti-Semitism. I've had more anti-Semitism here than in Nebraska. There was ignorance there. But funny story, when we bought a house, my wife and I go out to buy a washer and dryer. A washer. And dryer. We go to the appliance store, and I say, if we buy a washer and dryer at the same time, is there a discount? And the guy looks at me and goes, no, we don't Jew around. And my wife, I realized this man was a nice salesman. Until that moment, it wasn't anti-Semitic, it was ignorance. It was a word that's a word he used, not realizing it's hurtful. So I said, I'm Jewish, and that term is not, that's not a term you should ever use. It's a derogatory term. I think I'm very apologetic. He really felt bad, I could tell. Okay. So there was a lesson. We went home that night, and my brothers-in-law, I have 4 brothers-in-law, big guys, don't screw with them. And we told them, so they're like, kill that guy. Let's go back and start and just rip that guy's head off. So they're very defensive. But Omaha was a good place. Small Jewish community in Nebraska. Small, but very active, very affluent for the most part, because many of Omaha's home of Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway. Right. And many of his first investors were part of the Jewish community in Nebraska. In the 50s, there were 3 country clubs. The Catholic Club, the Protestant Club, the Jewish Club. He couldn't join the Catholic Club, Warren Buffett, because he was Protestant. The Protestant Club was too snooty, so he joined the Jewish Club. So all his friends were Jewish. And I met some fascinating people there. And it's interesting, people in Omaha, there's a joke. You either invest in Warren Buffett or you say, I could invest in Warren Buffett. And many of those who did in the 50s, 60s became fabulously wealthy. But because it's Nebraska, they made $1 million. What do? They buy a nice Chevy. They make $2 million, convert the carport for their nice Chevy to a garage. And I met some great people. There's a wonderful Jewish community center with a pool. I'm a swimmer and I loved it. And I get there a couple of weeks from there. See, Bobby comes up. I'm Bobby. You're the new Jewish guy from New York, right? I said, yeah. And start talking. I want to meet my mom. She was not gallery. Turns out Mrs. Eisenberg and her husband survived World War II. She survived because Mengele's did not pick her at Auschwitz.
Mm.
His father survived because Raoul Wallenberg gave him a passport. They lost all their family in Europe, came to New York in 46, had no one. In those days, in New York, the Jewish community sent you out, or the Jewish community set you up. They sent the Eisenbergs to Omaha, Nebraska. And Mrs. Eisenberg, they were from Krakow originally, Mrs. Eisenberg, very cultured, educated. She opened the first real art gallery in Nebraska.
Wow.
Mark Chagall, Ed Sheen's Casa. Peter Friendly and Mrs. Buffett played cards together, bridge, with, and invested $50 a month, whatever it is. When Mrs. Eisenberg passed about 20, 15 years ago, she lived in a nice Cape Cod, drove a nice Oldsmobile, had $150 million in the bank, And Bobby, her son, who's about my age, invested it. And now Bob's career is going around the world dropping money off of places that in honor of his parents. But you never know it. So Omaha's got a very interesting community, Jewish community. And we go back there once a year. My wife's father's still there in the family. So
I have another question about the book, and anybody who has a question, feel free to jump in and ask me, but how did you decide on, you switched back and forth in different time periods, several different time periods. Most recent, it was very recent.
In the book? Or about him?
What?
I didn't say really.
Okay. Oh, in the book goes back.
In the book, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Different chapters have different, 2015, I can't remember the dates, 2019.
It goes from 83 to 2018.
Right. And you go back and forth, so it's not,
It's not linear.
So how did you decide on that? And then, did you start out with that? I mean, how does that
I
work?
started out like that, and it wasn't a conscious decision when I started writing because I really didn't know where I was going. I just started going back and forth like a hill, hills and valleys, and it just seemed to work to me. And I was very concerned if it would be too confusing for the reader. And a few readers have said it was kind of confusing for them, but most everybody, once they realized they got the rhythm of it. But it took a while for some readers to get that rhythm.
Bernie, you read, did you have any
Yeah,
comments?
I was wondering, this whole book is really many, many, many stories put together, very short stories, and very, it was particular incidents in people's lives, and the next incident may have nothing to do with the one before it. How did you manage to make up so many different little stories and put it into that big book? I think that's more incidents in their lives than I had in mine. It's really astounding what you put together, and how did you decide which comes where?
The book when I said at the end, it was much longer, and I cut out a lot because it was too much.
I'd like to read those also.
It was too much. Yeah, when I sent her what was printed, it was 200 pages. The last piece. She said, "This is not War and Peace. It was just too long." Another friend of mine.
You read that portion about the meeting, what's his name, Michael's grandmother?
Yeah.
Ruth McGinnis.
And I was wondering, when did you write that? And how did you know that it was going to become the end of the book?
I wrote the book. I didn't go back when I wrote the book. I wrote each chapter the way you read it. I went back and forth myself when I wrote these chapters. I didn't write the preface. I didn't write the preface last. I guess that started as just a story, really individual. I didn't know where it was going. But it just happened that way. It was stream conscious.
Each chapter has
But I loved how each, what one critic said, he loved that each chapter informed the next chapter in some way, learned more about the characters. It was like an onion peeling. And I like that metaphor.
You mentioned this nothing to do with being Jewish. Studio 54.
Yeah.
My
Who's your
husband used to
person?
hang out there.
I
Oh, he
did
met
too.
everyone.
I did.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Wow.
he met Elton John, he met, what's her name? Diana Ross.
Leslie Minnelli.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he went out with, what was her name? From Saturday Night Live, unfortunately,
Gilda
Gilda Radner.
Who was
That
this?
the one, David.
David. Oh, her husband. Wow. Wow.
Well, I was in Westchester changing diapers, but we weren't married at that time.
Okay.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was in art school in the 70s.
Uh-huh.
And, I wasn't, I'm a little short, not that great looking guy. So before you had to be someone to get in there. But when you were in art school in the 70s in New York, you were part of a cool group. And I was, my colleague, my student classmates were all some of the really cool new people. So you go as a group, then we used to go there regularly.
Yeah.
What was it like?
As decadent as you've said. I mean, it was just, I can't, my kids.
People screwing around, doing on.
Yeah, it
on
was
drugs,
like,
the
a
whole
lot of cocaine and music. It was a lot of cocaine. My kids would never, I lie about something. No recording this, be careful. But
Is it no retroactive?
no retroactive, right? It was a different world. New York City was in the 70s. New York was dangerous and dirty and scary. But when you're in art school at 20 years old, this is fun. This is what it is, and
Yeah.
it's excitement. And I'm so glad we had no videotape, no YouTube. And see what we did because who wants to see? And then Bram is a carry in the book. Bram gets fake ID like everybody knew did. In those days, you could drink at 18, but if you were 16, you could shave. You had a fake ID and, showed up at places you weren't supposed to. There's no cell phones, so no mom could call and say, "Where are you? It's late." What I mean?
But you had to, I vaguely remember you were supposed to dress and look cool and they'd only let certain people.
Well,
in.
at that time, the art school friends were the ones that went with, Teresa Spelter, and Jackie Waugh, friends of mine. They were glamorous. They'd, get to the front door and go, "Oh, yeah, come in, Jackie and your friends." So if I went by myself, I never would have got in, But who would go by themselves? You go with a pack of friends, and it was fun.
He said Andy Warhol was really creepy.
Oh, creepy. He was. He was so creepy. Andy Warhol, he was everybody in New York who saw him at some point in New York. I mean, and Alan, who
Yes.
Alan
Seinfeld.
Steinfeld.
Oh,
Alan is my childhood friend. Alan, and he went to school in Buffalo. I was in the city, so come down and hang out with me. But you'd see Andy Warhol everywhere. The guy was really creepy. I mean, he just looked at you, stare at you, and he's like, he wasn't engaged. He went up to me. He's like, he was really maybe germaphobe or something, but he was a creepy guy. It there used to be a
Those were the
place.
days,
There used
right?
to be a restaurant. It was everything was downtown. We never going below 14th Street was like whoever lived up here. This is, never go. When I moved to here, I couldn't believe what am I doing here? This is not me.
But it must have been exciting to feel like you're one of the cool kids, right?
It's interesting when you're in art school in the 70s. I mean, I felt I was like the coolest guy in the world when I wasn't. But then the minute I got graduated, Parsons. I remember walking down St. Mark's Place, and I was no longer in school. And there's a group of guys and women, maybe a year younger than me, still in school. And I realized that I'm no longer part of that world. Even at 22, you're no longer part of that cool group who is 18, 19. You're over the hill, Even I realized it was this moment, they were having a great time, like 3 a.m. They were in a reunion, I guess. But art school in New York is really interesting because I mean, it was, most interesting creative group of people in the city who were in art school. Parsons, School of Visual Arts, Pratt, and SVA. We used to have a softball league, which is a joke because nobody knew how to do anything. And basically sit around drinking and taking drugs in Central Park. But every year they had the Beaux-Arts Ball. It was in the custom. Now it's the Indian Heritage Museum in Wall Street. It's a big museum there. It was the Customs House. And you used to go down there Halloween or in Mardi Gras, Mr. March, and everybody had incredible costumes. The art students, our costumes were, you work for weeks on your costume. It was just so much fun.
I remember on 57th Street West, not where we are, the School of Visual Arts, right?
School of Visual Arts, yeah, that was it.
They would have some of the outfits in the windows, right?
Yeah. Now it's downtown
Yeah,
It's
but that was pretty cool, yeah. Well, I have, we want you to do some more readings, but I had a question about your background, which is very different from Studio 54. You were involved in urban economic development.
yes.
What is that? What did you do?
My
How did it
career
work?
made money. When I graduated college, I took one class of urban design. One of my classes like painting and drawing. Took one with urban design, and when I graduated college, my grandmother had passed away a few years before, so I inherited money just for college. It wasn't a lot. It was only meant for college. I couldn't use for anything else. I had $2,000 left to graduate. I had to go to education. I had to convince whoever the lawyer was that travel is education. So I always wanted to go to Europe, never been there. And I didn't know anybody. Today, everybody knows people around the world. Internet, you have friends. I knew people in the Bronx. That was far from me. I didn't know anybody in Miami, Florida, man. Around. I knew no one in Europe, so I got a plane ticket to Europe, and I went to Europe and had a great time for a year. Lived on $10 a day, whatever it was. Came back to New York, and I had to get a job. I had no money, so I started in for a community organizer in Queens, and in the late 70s, early 80s, the city was a mess. And federal money was earmarked to improve neighborhoods all around the city. We just started. Neighborhood economic development was a concept. And I worked for a small group of Queens. I started working there. I was there 10 years. Left, went out west, came back, and got involved in city planning, economic development, which is helping people start small businesses. And most of my work has been in Queens. I worked for the government, for the academia for 2 years. I was a terrible academic. I was a dean of economic development with Bornstein Community College on the Bridge, and I didn't get the academic world. It was too political for me, and not a lot of fun. And I came back to where I started, the Queens Economic Development Corporation, 16 years ago.
Young
As
corporation.
director, it's not a nonprofit. I'm a director. I'll be there until I retire. I'm not going to anything else. I have a great staff. And Josh is on my staff, and I had him volunteer today to help do the Zoom. But it's a great staff, and we do a lot of good things, helping people start and grow their small business. And because it's Queens, mostly minorities, immigrants, women, all different low middle income people. And nobody comes to me with $1 million in a year. It's like, I want to open a cookie business. How do I start? I want to open a website for my company. So I love what we do. I have a great staff, and we help a lot of people.
It's great. I'd love to learn more about it, or maybe you can
I'd be
have people
happy.
talk about it.
We just started a program to help the formerly incarcerated, and this is a great story. The woman starting it is Evie Litwack, who she's in her mid-70s. She grew up, middle class, did really well, worked at Wall Street, made millions of dollars, did some bad things, ended up in prison when she was 60, served for 5 years with Martha Stewart, the same prison, came out, and she said, I want to help people in my position. She could not get a job when she got out because even though she had skills, she was marked in prison. So she started a small nonprofit, now they're working with us, a program to help people start their business when they've been in prison, which is a whole set of variables that we never have to think about.
Well, I'd love to have you read more about it. Barbara, who's a resident in your building, is the program chair of Hadassah here in New York.
Yes.
So I thought you might be interested to
Absolutely.
hear
Would
from
you be interested to do a speaking?
I would love to do a speaking
Okay,
engagement.
wonderful. It would be sometime, I guess, maybe in June.
Okay, we'll
Whatever
work that
it
out.
Give me your
Why don't we,
information.
oh, here we go.
I'm the salesperson, I'm the director of marketing. My book.
Okay, we'll work this out when we finish.
Well, if Hadassah is part of the Jewish Book Council,
I would like to.
sure. If
Oh, we'll
Hadassah
pass
is
it down.
yeah.
Okay.
The Jewish Book Council, I got involved with about 6 months, about a year ago. They have an author's network, and you send your book. I probably should not record this, but it's funny. The Jewish Book Council is, if you want your book out there, you can remember the author's network, and they send it out to all these Jewish groups, Hadassahs, JCCs, synagogues around the country, and they're members. So I sent them my book. and I got a very terse email saying it's not accepted because it was published on May 31st. They only accept books published June 1st.
Oh.
On one day. If I would have known, I could have waited 24 hours, but I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I was really upset because my friends in publishing said, you must get it. This is a great opportunity. So I decided not to write back to the woman who sent me the terse email. It wasn't very good. But I write to the director of the National Jewish Book Organization. I understand rules. I'm a bureaucrat. I know you. But is there any way to work this where I can be part of this to benefit the community? And she wrote back beautifully was saying, Seth, if you publish a second edition, then it's eligible. So my hard copy, which only had 10 of, was
That's funny.
published February this year to say now I'm eligible. So I got in and I've been speaking. I'm a star in New Jersey. I've been at four events in New Jersey the last 2 months. Englewood, Deal, somewhere else. I'm hot in Jersey. And I love doing it. So I'd be happy to be anywhere.
Okay,
Oh, we made a marriage.
Shut
There we go.
I have some, I'll tell you about.
Oh, good, wonderful. Okay, you can do a little more reading.
If you want, I can do a short. I'll do a short read. I'll do. Diane can be here.
Okay. Yeah.
She's a volunteer Yivo.
I know,
Yeah.
tell us, yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Somebody who was born Unitarian,
Actually,
right?
okay, well, she's Catholic, born Catholic, but
Yeah, born Catholic.
she worked at the UN for years. And even though she never converted, everybody assumes we meet, she's the Jewish one. How they figure out I'm not the Jewish one is always kind of weird. But we met, I digress because it was interesting. We met in 1983 on a trip through Eastern Europe on a bus. Went through East Germany, Poland, and Russia. In those days, you had to go on a tour. You couldn't travel on your own. And I get in the bus, and there's this two sisters, and it was a weird trip. And I'm thinking, what am I doing here? And we started, Diane and I started talking, and she's in Nebraska, living in New York, going to college. And we were in Warsaw, and we stopped at the Warsaw Ghetto Monument. And I'm there with Diane looking at it. Everybody looks at Diane and goes, could you translate the Hebrew for us, assuming she's the Jewish one? It was really kind of funny, But she worked many years at the UN, retired last 2 years ago, and she wanted a volunteer job. As you all know, it's hard to be docent somewhere in the city. It's possible. She sent out resumes, and Yiva called her, and she saw a documentary by Yiva and loved what they did. She loved volunteering there.
Oh.
So that's exciting.
You never know where history's gonna take you.
Exactly. So if you'd like, I can read one more section.
I love it, sure.
Right, this is where Bram and Liz actually meet. It's early in the book. It's in Paris on the Boulevard Saint-Germain. Liz is just her fiance, who she's traveled through Europe with. She realizes he's a total jerk. And she's alone there sitting in the Café du Magot on Boulevard Saint-Germain. And she sees this guy who had all his coins from making money. Cars fell on the street. He's picking them up. She helped him. He walks away and starts counting his coins. She's there by herself, kind of stewing because she realizes this guy she was going to marry is a jerk and she can't marry him. She doesn't know who this other guy is. Would you like a seat? She asked. He looked up. No merci, no merci. No thanks, I'm good. Continued to count. The waiter brought over the croque monsieur that Corey forgot about. You hungry? Liz said. You're not? Bram asked, looking at the plate of food. He ordered it. Come and sit down. It's easier for you to count. If you don't eat this, it'll go to waste. You probably hadn't had a meal all day, she thought, watching her eye the croque monsieur. Okay, merci, thanks. He sat down across from her. My pleasure. J'appelle Bram, he said, extending his hand. English, please. If you think my fiance spoke French if you think he spoke French like a Corsican, my French is even worse, like a Canadian. I'm Liz. Bram, is that a French name? No, it's short for Abraham. He took the fork, speared a piece of croque monsieur, and with his fingers pointed the slice of meat between the cheese. Bram rhymes with ham. Only one syllable instead of three. I figure it'll save me a great deal of time over my entire life. And he took a bite, nodded his approval of the dish, and then asked, was he your boyfriend? Though he seemed fluent in English, he had an ever so slight accent. My fiancée, Liz said as she wiggled her finger with the diamond ring. He was good looking, with a dark complexion, deep green eyes, and thick wavy black hair that curled at the ends. And he was more than a few days removed from a shave. His shirt had holes in it, but of course his perfectly draped scarf hid most of them. Maybe he was Roma? She'd seen gypsies busking in Italy and here in Paris. They performed mournful tunes on violins, not Johnny Cash on a guitar. You have good taste. Your fiancé is quite handsome. Maybe he was gay, Liz thought. Gay gypsy? She knew gay guys could be scruffy, but even so, most would never be seen with a shirt with so many holes in it. You think my fiancé is good looking? She asked. In a preppy old American Ivy League country club Republican sort of way, Ram answered. Liz tried not to be startled. This guy interacted with Corey for 2 minutes. It pretty much summed up the trajectory of his life, probably hers too. That's not necessarily a bad thing, he continued. I know there are many women who admire square-jawed men, shop at J Press, enjoy bland food, and vote for Ronald Reagan. But I don't think you were one of them. He looked down at the plate. You do make an excellent cook, monsieur here, but you pay dearly. He looked back at her. So, how come you're not going back to the States with your fiancée? Liz looked at him and says, he needs to be in San Francisco with Todd. His roommate at Yale is getting married. There's a bachelor party at the country club with Todd's prep school friends, who all probably voted for Ronald Reagan. Rand looked up at her and smiled. The smile brightened his face considerably. Her mood too. So that's the initial meeting.
I must
That's
tell
right.
you, have a great ear for dialogue. Joe.
Yes, yes. It's
I
very real.
love dialogue. You know.
Bernie?
So I wanted to also ask, in the book, the two people who hold the families together very well, very reasonably pragmatic in what they're dealing with the world, are Liz and her mother, Joan. Is there any particular reason why you picked out two non-Jewish women to sort of be the background in a very neat way, not boss-like, but just on a very reasonable, pragmatic?
It wasn't a conscious decision about what their religion was. It was just women have no. I was raised by strong women. You know, well, I knew both my parents. Like I said, a bad marriage, but my mother's very strong. Her mother's very strong. My aunt was very strong, and sometimes in a negative way. But I've always admired women who were strong in a positive way. And my wife is like that. Her mother, my mother-in-law, my late mother-in-law, she could have been a CEO of a company if she was born differently. I worked for women managers most of my life. Queensborough president Claire Shulman from politics. She was an incredible elected in the city, strong. Unlike elected today, who only care about the next election, she had a vision. In my office, I worked with a woman as the administrative assistant for many years, and Loretta she retired a few years ago. Her health was not good, but also if she was a black woman born in 1945, she would have been a very different life. Very strong and caring and warmth, and I'm attracted to those kind of women. So I see them as holding the world together in some ways. I often, tell the story. We all know the story of the Talmudic story of 18 wise people they say wise men that hold the world together. They don't know it, but their good deeds keep the world in balance. And it always says men. And I'm having a discussion with a friend who's observed that it should be people because not men. Women, I think, keep the world in balance. My dad saw terrible things, served in the war, lived to 101. And he always said, women were in control, there'd be no war in this world.
Yes. I believe that
Yeah,
too.
really, I remember saying that. I'm attracted to. My wife is very strong. I have two daughters who've grown up in that manner too. They're very strong. I'm the odd man out in my family.
Well, being strong doesn't mean
My daughter is strong too.
My
taking
husband
over, yeah.
Like you, he always felt if you have a job to do, give it to a woman, she'll get it right.
I'm really.
Well, we had a woman just lose the election. You
Yeah.
mentioned Trump.
Well,
a couple of times.
do.
You want to comment on that?
You know, I'm not a fan, obviously, but it's not a political book. Graham he sort of makes fun of everybody, both sides. He's a little sort of cynical about it. But, you know, Trump is a bully and Graham doesn't like bullies.
Mm.
You know, my whole thing with Trump, you know, in 2015, we made fun of the handicapped reporter.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
was awful.
that moment was, to me, said everything. You know, children make fun of other children, and they're children. And when a child made fun of by another child can go to an adult to help for help. But when an adult makes fun of something like that, and a child sees that, it's the most humiliating thing in the world. And so I had that experience. When I was young, I had mild case of cerebral palsy, but I never started swim. I ran the marathon. Now I use a cane. My leg retired to Florida. The rest of me is here. But when I was in third grade, all my friends, if someone had made fun of me for running the way I walked, my friend Larry, the guy in Beverly Hills, would like knock his head over. No one made fun. Rarely did it happen. When it did, my posse of like, oh, you did, I'm going to kill you. In third grade, the teacher made fun of me, and none of the kids, they were too young. You don't ask. You don't go to. You can't question an adult. I went home and didn't say anything to my parents. All the kids' went home, told their parents what happened. My mother fire calls that night, see if I was okay. It was humiliating. So when I saw what Trump did that 2015, it brought back that humiliation. And at that moment, no matter what he could do, he could get anything but in my book. And these adults don't do that.
This character. Josh, we can end. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We hope you enjoyed it. Okay.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
okay.
Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.